All right. Good morning, everyone, or whoever decides to join me here this morning. Hopefully, I can keep this to about an hour. I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to do a revisit of Black boys' low literacy rate. Uh, there are a lot of things happening in the country right now. I don't know if this country is going to look like 10 years from now, even 5 years from now. There are a lot of things in the news cycle that we are hit with. We just, this week we had the affirmative action piece. Yesterday was the student loan piece. Um, well, I haven't heard. Well, there's Ukraine. There's AI. There's so many things being talked about. Climate. The world's burning up. The world's not going to be here in another 10 years. The world is not going to be here in another 50 years. So there's so many things that we are hit with. But there are a lot of things that aren't discussed. And I think that with me being a writer and a blogger and working on a book, I think that this is something that I need to present back to the world and say, hey, this is going on too. This whole thing of uh, Black boys in the United States only reading at a 10% level. Nobody's talking about that. And when you mention it to people on the street, people look at you like, is that real? Is that true? I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know that was going on. So this stream is going to be a bit of a public service announcement, or it's just gonna put it back out into quote unquote the ether. I'm going to attempt to do this in a very collegial and scholarly way. This is not going to be a panel. And I'm going to say something about that. Let me make sure I can see myself on YouTube. All right, there's an ad. All right. So many of you have noticed that I haven't really done a lot of panels, and that's well, it depends on what the topic is, but when you're on social media, right, and you're not behind an avatar, you have to be careful about the discussions you're in. And you have to be careful about who's on your channel or your panel because onlookers are going to say, okay, well, you didn't say it, but that was you. You hosted whatever. Employers are looking, colleagues are looking. So since I started showing myself and marketing myself as a writer and it's just important to be careful of your image. And yeah, and if you're hosting a panel and you don't know who's going to say what, that can have ramifications for you down the road. So this is not going to be a panel discussion. It's going to be, I have some discussion points. I have a couple of articles that I'm going to present, and then I'm going to hop off. I have some excerpts I'm going to share as well in terms of uh, sound clips and video clips, and that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to hop off so I can start getting my holiday weekend underway. So I'm going to play my intro. You guys let me know what you think there in the chat. As a disclaimer, the thoughts in the chat don't necessarily reflect the thoughts of the host. That's for protection as well. So I'm going to play my little intro, which I have to update, and then I'm going to hop in on the other side. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Big Discussions 76, my original channel. Uh, please like the stream. Please share it, and please consider subscribing if you haven't. I want to thank everyone who has supported the shorts. I've been really working the shorts lately. Those are a valuable feature because much of the population today can't watch something for more than 2 minutes. So those are nice, quick hits that help your channel grow. So I want to thank everyone who has supported those. T. Riddler, you asked a question here. What do I have planned for the holiday? Well, I will keep it vague, and I will say some family time. I'll just say that some family time, and on my father's side. So I will keep that vague in that way. Okay, so today's topic. Give me a second here. So, where did this topic come from? So, I'm going to admit that uh, because of where I come from, see, in this world, we're all living in different worlds, and not everybody is privy to the same information. So, even with my background, even from where I come from, and in the career that I'm in, I didn't, in the middle of the 2010s, I think, as the Obama administration was winding down and Don Cheeto got elected, I was not paying attention to literacy rates. I was not paying attention to where young Black males were in terms of reading. So I didn't know. So I'm going to credit the Black Manosphere. That's a curse word for some people. That's a curse word for some people. But there are important discussions taking place in that collective of channels, some of which that don't involve women, and some of the discussions involve technology. Some of them involve education. But it was through that collective that I started hearing about, you know, Black boys reading at 10%, or Black boys reading below 10% nationally. Um, and while I've kind of become I think someone said I'm adjacent. While I've become adjacent, there are discussions that on my current path that I can pull along with me, and that I think are important to talk about and call to people's attention. So even though I'm not doing a panel, I think that it would be important for people to share this because, again, we're all in different worlds, even in this one society, and not everybody knows that this is going on. There are a whole bunch of other things talked about between elections and then during election time, but who says to candidates, hey, Black boys are only reading at 10% in our country? Who's calling that to everyone's attention? No one's calling it to everyone's attention. And as I'll describe in this piece, one of the pieces that I found, there there are very few resources dedicated to that, in terms of even just the research and even just the literacy aspect of it. So no one's paying attention, and it seems like no one really cares. So this is important in that way. So I described before the intro that one of my motivations for doing this is that no one cares. No one's paying attention. No one's talking about it. But the other thing is, most of you know, and if you don't know, I am working on a book, and I have to find a nice weekend to sit down and go over the final details. But it's a sports related story. If you guys don't know, I have a sports channel. I just posted something on my community tab today. It's a sports related book, but it's a life story. It's a life related book, and there are a lot of messages in there. I mean, there are messages in there for everybody, but there are especially messages in there for young men, particularly about how to persevere and how to make your way in the world, uh, even when you don't have all the tools you need right there with you as a young person. It's about finding mentors. It's about turning negatives into positives. But it has occurred to me, okay, I've spent all this time on this really cool story, and it's whenever you create art, you think it's new and novel, and you think it's cool, but the one demographic who may be able to benefit from it the most, they can't read. They have low literacy rates. So if they can't read and they have low literacy rates, will they even buy it? Will they even care? So that occurred to me. Okay. So I'm going to ground this discussion in environment, uh, and culture, environment and culture. Many of you have heard me talk about a gentleman named Malcolm Gladwell. I really started mentioning him um, at the beginning of this year. He's an author, speaker, and podcaster. I believe he wrote for the New Yorker, and I have several of his books, and I watch his revisionist history podcast. One of my favorite books of his is Outliers. It wasn't the first book of his that I read, and there's a video of his which is in the description box below, where he's speaking at UPenn, which is an Ivy League school, for those of you who don't know, and he's talking about outliers. And there's a part that's one of my favorite videos. I find myself watching that video all the time. And there's a stretch, a small snippet of that video where one of the people in the audience asks him about President Obama. This was around the time President Obama was running, and this is around the time that he got elected. So he asks him, because Outliers is about how successful people become successful and what they did to become successful and what environments were in place for them to become successful. And so someone said, well, how did Obama basically get to become president? It's a very interesting passage. I clipped it into two parts. I'm going to play both of them, and then I'm going to jump in because I think it sets the stage really nicely for this discussion. So this is part one. Everyone bear with me. Everyone bear with me. These aren't long. The first part is about 2 minutes. I'm going to say a few words after that one. And then the second part is about a minute and a half. So just bear with me. 2 minutes, 23 seconds. Just bear with me.
Justin, I hope you might share some thoughts on Obama and how he fits into your theory of success.
Yeah. I was going to answer, it's always a hard one to. There's a couple of interesting things. You know, in the second half of the book, we didn't talk about this here, but in the second half of the book, I talk a lot about culture and about what are the ways in which our cultural heritages influence the way we behave and influence our ability to achieve. And so I have two chapters, one which talks about how your cultural heritage affects your ability to do math, and another is about how your cultural heritage affects your ability to fly an airplane safely. And in both those cases, I believe and argue that almost nothing is more relevant to the discussion of what it takes to be good at math and what it takes to be a good pilot as the cultural background of the math student or the pilot. And so it's an exploration of just about how extraordinarily influential culture is. And then I have a chapter on my parents, on my mother's family. My mother is a brown-skinned Jamaican, and that chapter is all about what does it mean to be a brown-skinned Jamaican, and what are the, and it turns out there are a whole series of advantages rooted deeply in the peculiar history of Jamaica that accrue to people who are of mixed race background in Jamaica. Among them, the fact that the British colonial presence in Jamaica, if you were the offspring of a slave and a landowner, as my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was, you were freed. You weren't pushed back into slavery as you were in America. In Jamaica and in the West Indies, you were freed because the British wanted to, they were so outnumbered, they wanted to kind of gather as many hopefully friendly faces around them as possible. So they would actually educate mixed-race offspring. And the argument there is that this kind of pattern of advantage that goes back 300 years matters today. It helps to explain why my mother has been as successful as she has, and it helps to explain why her mother was as successful, and on and on.
So in that passage, he was talking about environment. He is of Jamaican descent. His mother is Jamaican Canadian. He's Jamaican Canadian, but he was talking about how the children of slave owners in Jamaica, the mixed race children of slave owners in Jamaica, they were given preferential treatment, and that shaped the success of their progeny going forward. And so that's a different experience than what we experienced here in the United States, where even after emancipation, there were still a slew of issues and policies and for us to deal with, and there was violence, and there was Jim Crow, and there were all these different things that we had to deal with here that have affected how our people did since those times. So he's making the argument for environment. He's making the environment for the fact that his mother was mixed race, and in some instances got preferential treatment in Jamaica that set her up to become successful. So now in this one, he's going to segue. This is just a minute and a half. So he's going to segue into talking about President Obama and his background. And again, just think about environment and how environment shapes the opportunities around us, and how environment impacts some of the things that we see and we experience. And I'm going to tie this all together at the end.
Well, I'm very tempted to make that kind of argument with Obama. I don't know enough about, I'm not in a position to make it in a kind of sustained way, but it is more than significant that he is the product of, that his father is African, Kenyan, and not African American. And I don't mean that in any way as a way of denigrating African Americans and and holding up Africans. I'm simply saying, look, these are two profoundly different cultural heritages, and once we are honest and open and acknowledge that our cultural heritages matter, we have to. I think we have to say, look, surely it is significant that this man comes from this particular kind of background and was not, as a result, saddled with so many of the particular and I think exquisitely meaningful burdens that come with being an African American. Along the same lines, I've always thought it was. Well, no, I'll stop at that. But it's a difficult thing to discuss in a kind of open way. But I think it's worthy of consideration.
So one of the things I noticed when I watched that part of the video is how much he hesitates at the end. I'd like to meet Malcolm and interview him one day, but I think the reason he hesitated, and he was hesitating because at that time, President Obama was the Messiah, and you didn't want to say anything bad or question how he got to where he was. That's the way I interpreted that. But if you go back, what he was saying was President Obama came from a specific background and a specific heritage. His father was Kenyan and his mother was white. Okay, and then he was even raised by, I think I know his father left, but he was raised in Hawaii by an Asian man because his mother got together with an Asian man. So that's a very, very different cultural background and cultural journey than a black man would face here in the United States. So as you're thinking about, as we're talking about this, as we're talking about why the reading level, the literacy levels are so low, ask yourselves, how much does culture and how much does environment matter? I have 3 links I'm going to share. Two of them are short. One of them is a actual research paper. I'm just going to sprint through the main points. But before I jump into that, I want to say a few words about my environment. You guys see that I'm wearing a superhero Marvel t-shirt this morning. Well, in my home environment, and everybody's home environment was different. I acknowledge that. In my home environment, there were books and there were encyclopedias and there were reading materials there, and education was stressed and education was encouraged. And I'm realizing now we were in church and Sunday school most Sundays, and this is not to encourage or proselytize to you viewers, but I'm realizing that a part of those Sunday school lessons, and they were difficult to endure at that time, involved we had books with Sunday school lessons and scriptures that we had to read. So we were always reading. Comic books. I'm wearing this shirt. My brother got me this. This is The Dark Knight Returns. I have this graphic novel. I have Kingdom Come. I still have comic books. Outliers. This is my copy of Outliers right here. I've got all kinds of books. The Four Agreements. If you got to fix something, you need your home improvement book. The Richer Sex. This may offend some people, but The Richer Sex. It's on the current social climate. Powernomics. The Laws of Human Nature. There's so many secrets. There's so many tools and lessons in books that if you can't get to those secrets and that information, you are locked out of a lot of things. You're locked out of a lot of things. And then the other thing is, with so many young men not being able to read and having very low literacy rates, the question is, what happens to them? Where do they go? What do they do? What's their fate? Because everything to be successful legally in this modern society, pretty much most of that involves reading to some degree. Whether you go into a white collar career or whether you go into a blue collar career, reading is critical. So what happens to those young men who don't know how to do that? What's their fate? And also, what is the societal cost? What is the long-term societal cost for having such a large population of individuals who can't read and who are not literate? I'm going to play one. I don't want to stretch this out too long. I had an interview with someone on my STEM channel 2 days ago, and she asked me about my messaging. I'm going to play this, and then I promise I'll jump into the 3 articles I promised I present. Asada says books not too common in the average Black child's life. Okay, so that gets back to environment.
All right, so I got another question. So What message are you sharing with young people about STEM?
That's a good question. Before the pandemic, I was doing career days
Mhm,
here, mostly in Prince George's County.
mhm, mhm,
I have not been contacted to do that since things opened back up. I'm still
mhm,
open to doing it.
mhm,
When I go into certain communities, and it's funny, even because I'm in the public sector.
mhm.
I don't want to say exactly where I am, but I'm
I
in the
got
public sector. This is the hub for the federal government.
you.
A lot of people tell me I'm the first scientist they've ever met. And these are professionals. These are
Mhm,
lawyers. These
mhm,
are
mhm,
program analysts. These are government workers
mhm, mhm,
from our community, and they say
mhm,
you're the first scientist I've ever met.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
So I want, in part through this channel, I want to promote visibility,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
and I think that because there are a lot of images of the wrong things,
mhm. I get you. Hey, it's
especially for boys.
oh, definitely.
A lot of images for the wrong things, and in some instances, there's a challenge in embracing being smart and
Mhm,
embracing being articulate
mhm, mhm.
and embracing being a STEM person.
Right,
So those are all things that I want to get out and say that those
right.
things are okay. It's okay to be different. It's okay to open
Mhm,
up. It's
mhm,
okay
mhm,
to spend your time thinking about rockets and
mhm, mhm, mhm,
exoplanets or DNA and gene editing. That's
mhm.
okay.
Right, right.
Even if you're a little bit different, that's okay.
Mhm,
So even if you're a little bit different, that's okay. So going back to what Malcolm talked about regarding President Obama, there are unique challenges to being Black in America. I mean, there are racial things that you deal with outside of the community, but also inside, in some instances, being articulate and opening up a book and reading books. Those will cause you to start to speak and comport yourself a certain way. And there are challenges within the community with that as well. So that's a very, very nuanced and unique phenomenon to our people in the United States. Okay, so I'm going to jump in here. This first piece I found, I just did a quick Google search to kind of see where we were 13 years ago, where we were in the past, to where we are now. Okay, this first piece, this is short. This is entitled "The Shame of Black America Isn't That Our Boys Can't Read. The shame is that we do little to help them learn to read." This was written by Philip Jackson, and this is back in 2011. So how much progress have we made since 2011 on this front? So again, think about environment, think about where these particular boys are being reared and in what conditions they're being reared in and socialized in. 2011 reading levels of eighth grade Black males from the lowest performing large American school districts, city slash percentage of eighth grade Black males proficient in reading. So Milwaukee, 3%, Cleveland, 3%, Detroit, 5%, Washington, D.C., 6%, San Diego, 7%, Dallas, 7%, Baltimore City, 7%, Chicago, 9%, Jefferson County, Kentucky, 9%, Atlanta, 9%, Los Angeles, 9%, Philadelphia, 9%, Austin, Texas, 9%, Houston, 9%, Hillsborough County, Florida, 9%, Boston, 10%, Miami-Dade, 11%, Charlotte, North Carolina, 12%, New York City, 13%. About 10% of eighth grade Black males in the United States read at or above a proficient level. In other words, on average, If you count any 100 young Black men, only 10 of them read at a proficient level. In Milwaukee and Cleveland, only 3 out of 100 young Black men read at or above a proficient level. I, Philip Jackson, have challenged Black people to tell me that these statistics are not accurate, but so far, no challenges. In fact, only silence. How did we, Black people, allow this to occur on our watch, and what will we do about it? So this says, break the cycle, teach Black boys to read well by the 4th grade. Here's how. Read to Black boys between birth and 10 years old. Emphasize the value of education, not sports, not entertainment, not games, when Black boys are 2 to 12 years old. Give Black boys books for their birthdays, holidays, and to reward them for jobs well done. 4, enroll Black boys in Saturday University reading academies at your church, park district, library, or school, or call the Black Star Project at that number. I don't know if that number is still active. This is 12 years ago. Have Black boys between the ages of 5 and 15 years old read aloud to you for at least 30 minutes a week. Monitor and regulate the content of media your Black boys consume. Immerse Black boys in positive education-based peer groups. That's significant. That's very significant. Find a mentor or a mentoring group for your young Black men. Include culture, spirituality, history, economics, languages, and critical thinking in the education of Black boys. Ask the White House to support the Black Star Plan to teach Black boys to read well by the 4th grade. Okay, that's one piece. The second piece was written by a name many of you have heard of, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. I've never read any of Mr. Kunjufu's books. I've heard a lot about him. This one was written, no, that's the wrong one. I want to thank those of you who are hanging in here. This one is entitled, To Save Black Boys, We Must Teach Them How to Read. This was published just before the pandemic on February 7th, 2019. So this was in Black History Month. Okay, so this is by Dr. Jawanza. This is by Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. Only 12% of Black males are proficient in reading by the 8th grade. If this was the case for white males, the media would categorize this as an epidemic and a national security risk. If a Black male is not proficient in reading by the 4th grade, they only have a 20% chance of graduating from high school on grade level. America is not doing very well teaching Black boys how to read in the primary grades. They are atrocious in the upper grades. I never imagined when I wrote Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys that governors were going to use my 4th grade research to build more prisons. I naively thought they would realize it's more cost efficient to teach them literacy than incarcerate them at $38,000 per inmate per year with the recidivism rate of 85%. I believe literacy is the civil rights issue of this century. How can Black males be economically competitive illiterate? In 1920, 90% of Black youth had their fathers in the home because while many were illiterate, they worked on farms. In 1960, 80% had their fathers at home. While many were illiterate, they worked in factories. Today the figure, there's an extra S there. Today the figure has dropped to a meager 28%. It is impossible to be economically viable in this information economy illiterate. Historically, America has had a challenge teaching the majority of Black males how to read. Some schools believe that it is the job of parents in preschool. As a result, some children are now failing kindergarten. Many schools reduced their emphasis on phonics. Many schools reduced their emphasis on phonics. Other schools believe in social promotion, which explains how Black males are in high school with fourth grade reading and math scores. Can you imagine how Black males feel in high school illiterate? This explains why many are placed in special education, suspended, and drop out. Over 50% of Black males in special education are there because they are deficient in reading, literacy, not Ritalin is the answer. We must teach Black boys how to read. Can you fathom if we simply taught Black males how to read, we could reduce disproportionate numbers of Black males in special education, suspended, dropping out, unemployment, crime, drug addiction, incarceration, and fatherlessness. Again, that's why I believe literacy is the 21st century civil rights issue. I also believe another factor contributing to illiteracy is that Black boys have never fallen in love with reading. They never were given a book they could not put down. They have only read books to pass a test. Black boys need to love to read. They need books where they see themselves, their communities, their history, and culture. I suggest 4 books they will not be able to put down: Reading and Writing for Urban Survival, Hip Hop, A Street Curriculum, Yo Little Brother, Volumes 1 and 2, and the Autobiography of Malcolm X. Okay. I can attest to that. I read the Autobiography of Malcolm X in high school. So there was a lot there. There was a hell of a lot there. And from what Mr. Kunjufu said, a lot of the systemic things that we're seeing in terms of how Black boys perform, or how they're performing against Black girls, and how they're faring in society in general, he's suggesting that a lot of this is linked back to literacy and their educational start. So you all know some of the discussions that have been, well, Miss Ebony K. Williams, her discussion a couple of months ago. Is all this linked back to reading and literacy? Is that what this is? And also environment, and what kinds of environments are these boys being reared in? What kind of circumstances are they born into? Is there a connection? Can any of that be changed? Can any of that be fixed under the current circumstances? So this last piece, I have one more, and I'm not going to read this one all the way through because it's a research paper. But what I am going to do is, I did make notes here. I'm going to cue it up here on the screen. I did make notes here. I'm going to just point out some of the notes. All of this stuff is below in the description box. So if you guys want to take a look at these links yourself, you're welcome to do so. But again, the whole point of this is to speak on it and to let people know that this is here and this is happening. It doesn't get talked about enough. A lot of other things get talked about, but this one topic doesn't. I never hear about this at family get-togethers. I don't hear about this at social gatherings. I don't hear about this in the mainstream news. So no one is talking about this, and it begs the question: does anybody care? Okay. This final link I'm going to show you all is a paper from collaborative panel discussions and LRA research reports. Okay, so this is a literacy study. And I'm going to try to do it justice. Again, I'm not going to read through this verbatim, but I'm going to try to distill out the main points. And actually, I can just give you the main point and say that there's just not a lot of work in this area, and not a lot of work has been done, and not a lot of money has been invested in trying to turn this around. That's essentially what the authors of this study are saying. There's not a lot of work on this. There's not a lot of data available. There are not a lot of well-constructed stories. I'm sorry, there are not a lot of well-constructed studies, and there needs to be more resources invested in this area. So this is the state of Black male literacy research from 1999 to 2020. So this is covering about a 21-year span. This was written by Alfred W. Tatum, Aaron Johnson, and David McMillan. Okay, they attempted to comb the literature to help distill out what's happening and why. I thought this part was interesting because this part right here states that there was a tradition of Black male literacy. So there was a point at which it wasn't unusual for Black males to be educated and Black males to be able to read. So I'm going to read this first part. It says, we accepted the invitation from the Literacy Research Association to write about the state of Black male literacy research because intuitively we knew there was a need for this report. We also believed that a national research status might reveal findings or add explanatory power and implications for conducting literacy research focused on or involving Black male students. Additionally, we are personal witnesses to the absence or negligible presence of Black males across professional fields, disciplines, and higher education, with full recognition that this could be an outgrowth of literacy experiences in grades pre-K through 12. Let's see. A Black male literate tradition has flourished throughout every region of the United States. Black males have been reading, writing, and using language for their personal and collective advancement for more than 4 centuries. They have created and maintained a rich literate tradition despite policies and practices aimed at their suppression, oppression, silence, and exile. Furthermore, there are thousands of artifacts that create a marvel of the literate tradition of Black males in every field of study and across local, national, and global contexts. This part of this paper here, these are passages of notable Black men from history reflecting on being encouraged to read at an early age. I'm going to read a few of these. This is from Benjamin Mays. I considered anyone my enemy who was not in sympathy with my aspiration to get an education. My teacher gave me a page with 40 multi-syllabic words on one page. I was like, yo, Miss Bonaparte, I love you. I gobbled up the 4 and 5 syllable words from Rakim's Sweat the Technique. Okay, so that was from Rakim. This one says, I got a hold of a book entitled The Columbian Order. Every opportunity I got, I used to read this book. That's from Frederick Douglass. Ooh, there's a quote there from Clarence Thomas. I'm not sure I should read that one. I'll read this one. I met every protagonist, antagonist, and writer of all stories I ever read in first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. That's from Kesey Lehman's Heavy and American Memoir. Okay, so this they talked about the approach of their study. They stated there were few longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies go out, they track individuals over years. There were also no randomized control trials, which are studies that measure the effectiveness of a new intervention or treatment. They stated, I underline this, the challenge appears to be moving from these 8 focal areas. I'm going to read that. They stated that most of the studies they read were qualitative and not quantitative. So they were more speculatory and less data driven. And they focused on these multiple areas here: anti-Blackness, anti-deficit achievement frameworks, critical narrative analysis, critical race theory, self-concept theory, self-efficacy theory, social cultural theory, motivational systems theory, oppositional culture theory. So the studies that they evaluated focused on all these theories, but very few focused on reading, writing, language development, and achievement and identity development. So they're essentially saying all the work that's been done, it's looking at nebulous areas, and nothing is getting down to the bare bones of what needs to be addressed. In terms of key research findings, one of their biggest findings was that all the research they looked at was based upon 0.0005% of the Black male average annual student population. So 0.0005% of the total population. So it's a very, very, very small sample size. So they didn't even look at enough samples to make any kind of conclusion. So in terms of results, and I'm going to wrap this up shortly. I underline this. This is under reading and achievement growth. Matthews examined the racial achievement gap between African American and white children, tracing academic trajectories of more than 1,000 Black boys. Their findings indicated that Black boys experienced more growth in literacy through first grade. By the end of the third grade, however, their growth was slightly behind. The reading gaps increased by the end of the fifth grade. However, the research did not indicate why this occurs. This study indicates the need for longitudinal research to examine the literacy development of Black boys across the developmental trajectory. So there's something age dependent that happens in terms of them learning and then them eventually falling off the wagon. There was something else I wanted to say here. Texts. Okay. Researchers also found a positive relationship between home literacy practices and reading achievement of Black boys. Knight found that the home to school connection positively impacted the reading scores of third, fourth, and fifth grade boys. Okay. So that particular study said that there's something about the home, the home working with the school. And when the home works with the school, then that creates a positive outcome for the boys in those third, fourth, and fifth grade levels. So something is happening there. And that goes back to a lot of what we're hearing today. And it goes back to something my father, who's a retired educator, said in an essay I shared here a couple months ago, or maybe last month. And that's that a lot of parents today feel like they could just drop the kids off and that's it. And the kids don't really do anything when they go home. And when they come back, the teachers have to do it over again. So there's less collaboration today between schools, the homes these boys come from. There's less collaboration between those homes and the schools. I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to wrap up. I could probably dedicate an entire live stream to this paper. I'm going to skip ahead to this part. This paragraph reads, preparing this report revealed that there is no national agenda to move Black boys to high levels of literacy, and no national alarms are being sounded, indicating that many Black boys' literate lives, thus their futures, are in jeopardy. So I think one of the big takeaways from this study is that there's just not a lot of work done in this area, and there haven't been a lot of resources invested in this particular area, and we're seeing that. I'm going to read this last passage and then I'm going to wrap this up. This is under directions for future research. It became clear as we created this report that the research for Black male literacy education lacks coordinated efforts to map out and strategically focus on optimal components with evidence-based approaches to advance the literacy development of Black males. The current research is inadequate. The current research is an inadequate lever to provide direction and guidance to advance the literacy development of Black males in pre-K through 12 at scale. However, it suggests the importance of reviewing and examining effective literacy practices from research involving very few Black male participants, while creating a more robust research infrastructure to conduct large-scale research studies solely or predominantly focused on Black males. This work led us to recommend the following to nurture a culture of Black male literacy research. One, establish a vision for Black male literacy development based on the strong Black male literate tradition and conduct research to move us toward the vision. Two, expand the scope of qualitative and quantitative research and place an increased focus on transferability and causal claims that link disparate results with long-term follow-up. Three, rally around a cohort of theoretical frames. And four, conduct comprehensive large-scale research that examines the literacy development of Black males across contexts, locations, and school types. Research literature on Black male literacy education has been premised on intersecting culture, economic, and gender defaults that have been and continue to be overgeneralized, overemphasized, over-theorized, under-scrutinized, and under-researched. This may suggest the need to re-examine research that gives explanatory power, justifies or legitimizes the literacy underperformance of Black males in the United States. This also suggests the need to re-examine research that advances practices or theories with scant research-based evidence on their effectiveness for moving a high percentage of Black boys to read and write at proficient and advanced levels using the lens of Black males with characteristically advanced levels of reading and writing as the guidepost. Thus, in our estimation, will lead us toward sounding the appropriate research sirens, squeezing teaching and texts for every ounce of possibility, and conducting research that yields social and scientific justice for Black males in grades pre-K to 12 or other contexts which may exist. Okay. So that's in the description box below, but there was a lot there, but I think the take home from this is that there just has not been a lot of quality work done investigating this. And also, it's not on many people's radar that this is happening. So, yeah. So there we are. So I am at about an hour. That's what I wanted to say. So I went over a lot here, but I think one of the important questions to ask is with those numbers being so high, with the literacy rates being so low, what environments are these young men coming from? What environments are these young men being reared in? I think several clues are there. But the hard part about talking about all this and talking about things like this are the root causes. What are the root causes to what we're seeing? And can anything be done about the root causes? I'm going to play the second part of the Malcolm Gladwell Obama excerpt, and then I'm going to wrap up after that, because I want us to end on environment and culture. What environments and cultures are these boys who are not making the literacy mark? Where do they come from?
Well, I'm very tempted to make that kind of argument with Obama. I don't know enough about. I'm not in a position to make it in a kind of sustained way, but it is more than significant that he is the product of that his father is African, Kenyan, and not African American. And I don't mean that in any way as a way of denigrating African Americans and and holding up Africans. I'm simply saying, look, these are two profoundly different cultural heritages, and once we are honest and open and acknowledge that our cultural heritages matter, we have to. I think we have to say, look, surely it is significant that this man comes from this particular kind of background and was not, as a result, saddled with so many of the particular and I think exquisitely meaningful burdens that come with being an African American. Along the same lines, I've always thought it was. I'll stop at that. But it's a difficult thing to discuss in a kind of open way. But I think it's worthy of consideration.
Exquisitely meaningful burdens. So exquisitely meaningful burdens exist outside of the community, and they also exist on the inside. Exquisitely meaningful burdens. It's a difficult thing to discuss in an open way. So I don't know that he intended when he gave that speech at UPenn, when he was talking about his book, he wasn't talking about this. But when you hear things, you say, okay, you could say, well, okay, that relates over here too. Okay, those are analogous, those are parallel. T. Riller, thank you. I hope someone got something out of this, but I just think that it's something that it's not on anyone's radar. With yesterday's affirmative action or the affirmative action ruling from 2 days ago, that involves white collar training. So I've been asking for a little while, is college the magic bullet for everyone? And I did publish this guest post about a week or so ago. I think this is a question that needs to be on everyone's radar right now going forward. Is a college degree the sole pathway for success? Is it the sole determinant for success? When you think about the costs, when you think about a person's individual gifts and a person's individual tendencies, is a college degree necessary for everybody? And I think this question ties in nicely with this, in that many boys, many boys are tactile. They're good with their hands. They're good at building things. They have a tendency to want to build things and break things apart. So that may not be the only pathway for success, and it may be necessary to bring those aspects back into education or design curriculums specific for boys. It's known that the current system doesn't necessarily work as well for boys. So is that college route the one route that should be for everybody? And is that the one route that everyone should be triaged to? Are the trades okay? Are the blue collar trades a viable route for some people, for some boys? Yes, and even there, reading is important there as well. I'm going to play one more excerpt from my interview on my STEM channel with Sheryl Pons, and here she talks about, this surprised me, she shared that in some instances, electricians who are blue collar tradesmen, they may make more money than attorneys and some doctors. So I think we just need to rethink this entire education thing, so that it could be that college is not the path for everyone. Reading is critical, don't get me wrong, but enforcing that as the only pathway towards success for everyone, we may be causing some casualties as well. So this is her talking about what electricians make. I recorded a short on this. This is where it came from.
And so I don't discourage trade school. I think if I was younger, I would be going to electrical training right now. Okay. And I think of the years when I was in manufacturing. I lived south of Chicago, not too far from the cornfields. I was only like 30 to 40 miles south of Chicago, but the next road over, it was cornfields, right? So there was not a whole lot to do other than, go to the mall or keep driving back and forth to Chicago. I wish I spent some of those weekends studying electricity, aside from what I learned in my engineering training, and just really learning if I had an electrician's license, okay, all these years, I mean, the money I could have made.
Really?
Yes. The the money I could have made pulling wire as a side hustle instead of doing the things we traditionally do, braid, twist hair, do gifts, Yeah, I could have done that. No problem. No problem.
So, Sheryl, what you're saying is that's been a well-paying field even before
I'm gonna tell you,
revolution.
I'm gonna tell you something. Electricians make more money than a whole lot of people, including lawyers and some doctors. So don't get it twisted. It's a lot of opportunity there, but you gotta love it, okay? And one of the reasons why I will not discourage trade school. I don't discourage. People should find. We in America, we can still find our path. Okay, go for it. There's no reason why in America you cannot pursue the career of your dreams, because we're still a wealthy nation, and there's a gobs of opportunity. And even though we deal with what we deal with as African Americans, right now you can pretty much go for what you want. So do it.
So there was a lot there, and I think it folds nicely into the Supreme Court's decision from this week and also this discussion. Is the college route the only way? Because in some instances, our blue collar brothers and sisters, in some instances, they're doing better than our white collar contingency, and in some instances, our blue collar brothers and sisters are our blue collar workers. I'll just say workers. They're looked at. They're not as well respected as our white collar individuals. So in some instances, there's a skewed way of looking at the world, but some people are not meant to go to college. Reading is still important, especially if you're going to be an electrician or a mechanical engineer. You still have to read, but that path is not, that white collar college path is not for everybody, in my opinion. One more thing, and I'm going to wrap up. So the sciences. I'm a scientist. I showed this on my STEM channel about a week or so ago when I got back from the University of Michigan. A major part of science is reading and writing, speaking as well, but reading and writing. This is one of my first author papers. This is my second first author paper from my graduate research lab. Okay. I helped write this. My advisor wrote a good deal of this. But this, a major part of this is doing the work, making the research finding, right, before some other group does. But the other part of this is reading and writing. Reading and writing. Reading, writing, and comprehending. Okay. So yes, those figures, those charts, they all look nice. I worked hard on those. But when I say that if a young man can't read, then he's basically locked out of the STEM fields, this is what I'm talking about, because everything has to be reported and documented in some way and published. So if you can't read or write, there's a huge part of this that you can't do. And this is in academia. But what about in the federal government, in the public sector? Everything there is reading and writing and documenting as well. So if you can't do that, if you can't comprehend what's being said, if you can't comprehend government statutes and government laws and what data means, then you're locked out of the whole thing. Vin224, thank you. I hope somebody got something out of this. I hope somebody did. I know that it was, in some instances, it might have been a little jumbled and disjointed, but I hope somebody got something out of this. But the entire in summary, what I wanted to get out, and I will probably take a chance and share this on my Facebook page. I'm very careful about what I share on my Facebook page, but nobody knows about this. Nobody knows. But this is the importance from the STEM aspect of this. No reading, no writing. You're not gonna get into AI. You're not gonna get into the pharmaceutical industry. You're not gonna get into um, quantum computing, electrical cars. You're not gonna get into anything. But then the question is, what's gonna happen to all of those young men, all those boys? What's gonna happen to them? Are they just gonna fill up prisons? Are they just gonna use up resources? Is this going to lead to some form of civil unrest? Are we headed towards some sort of cataclysmic event because of this? I don't know. We're already, let me slow down. We are already seeing some form of this. I read one passage on my YouTube channel from this book. I'd like to interview this gentleman as well, Nicholas Eberstadt. I read a passage from this book. It's in my library, Men Without Work. Well, we know that it's stated in this book and in the passage I read that a large chunk of the non-working men are Black men. I think this has something to do with it, this low reading proficiency thing. I think that has something to do with it. There are other things contributing to that as well, but there are larger ramifications for this for everybody, and nobody's talking about it. So I'm at 1 hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you to everyone who watched this. I might not do content for a little while aside from my shorts. It's a holiday week next week, and I need to relax. Speaking of reading and writing, many of you know that I have a newsletter. The link is below in the description box. Please consider joining. There's a 2-paragraph greeting, and there's a subscription button at the bottom. You just click that, and it takes you there. You enter in your email address, and you are part of the club. I promise I won't give your information away to a third party. The link is here. T. Riddler, that's a good point. I've thought about that as well. Is this a part of someone's grand plan? Now I may get myself in more hot water here, but I did notice during the Obama administration that when Black Girls Rock, I know that the great Michelle Obama, she helped spearhead that Black Girls Rock thing. I did ask myself, where's the Black Boys Rock? Where's something for Black boys? Where's the equivalent for Black boys? And so, is it any wonder that we're hearing all the rumblings today about there not being enough educated Black men for the educated Black women? Okay. For those who are not from the African American community, bear with me right now. This is something unique to well, is it unique to no, is it unique to our community? It might be system wide, but they say when the United States gets the cold, when the United States gets a cold, the Black community gets the flu. But the whole Black Girls Rock thing, that might have been a bit of a proxy for what we're seeing unfold now. You have this grand effort, this grand campaign, this catchy name, but where is the equivalent for the young men? And if you just do something for one side, is it a surprise that years later they don't have counterparts? That should not be a surprise. I want to show one more thing. I have another book here. Give me one second. This was sitting on top of my printer. The earlier kids start reading this stuff. This is Rich Kid, Smart Kid from Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad series. There's so much information in books, but if you can't read, you're locked out from this. So some kids, is it a wonder that some kids get to start early learning what stocks are, and some kids get to start learning early what real estate is, and then some kids don't catch on until they're 30 or 40 years old, or some kids don't catch on at all? If you can't read, you can't access this information. Yeah, there's the brother's keeper. The ghost of my brother's keeper has crept in. A Black Guru. Yep, that was, yeah. So there are a lot of, so going back to what Malcolm Gladwell said, wasn't it my brother's keeper? Going back to what going back to what Malcolm Gladwell said, exquisitely meaningful burdens. That's an exquisitely meaningful burden. The fact that my brother's keeper was not supported. That's an exquisitely meaningful burden. But that's a part of the Black experience as well in this country. All right, everyone. I need to go get a workout and prepare for vacation. So thank you to everyone who watched this. I just wanted to put this back out there because no one's talking about it. The talk is about everything else, but this is one of those very, very important issues that is flying conveniently under the radar. So everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good holiday on what's that, Tuesday? And I will talk to you the next time. All right. As always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Always try to do your best. Take care, and I'll talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.